Yeah, good thing it's nobody here.
Ready?
You don't have competition this year, do you? Better against you.
Nope.
Lucky you.
Okay, it is now 6 o'clock. My name is Barb Knappich, and I am the chair of the Laws and Ordinances Committee. And the topic today would usually be something that would come under Ms. Warden's, Councilwoman Warden's bailiwick as the chair of the Infrastructure Committee. However, there has been some discussion regarding legalities and some legal proposals that have brought this under my committee. So, as you know, this is a Laws and Ordinance Committee meeting. The topic is going to be the proposed peanut roundabout up by the high school, up on Burbank and Oldman Roads. And I first want to start out, there is an agenda. The agenda reads current plan, status, and cost of projects. And I'd like to discuss that first, then some of the traffic studies and statistics supporting the project. Pedestrian traffic, school and soccer, bike traffic, emergency vehicles and bus traffic, as well as a potential moratorium regarding this particular project. These are all topics that have been brought to my attention, have been brought to other council members' attention, that we thought it would be a good thing just to get it out in the open again to discuss this and to clarify some of the things that council wanted clarified on this, and some of the things that the public has wanted to have clarified on this. If we have time at the end, I will certainly take some public comment, and if we can keep it to 2 minutes. But absolutely, you know, we definitely want public comments on both sides, whether you're pro, whether you're con. The city did deliver to us today, those of us on city council, some letters of support for the roundabout. Some were new, some we had already seen, but you know, there's no question there is support for this project as well as some concerns about this project. And that's what we'd like to get out here tonight, to discuss this thoroughly, so that whatever happens, people are very clear on what happens and why it happens, and has the best and people have the best information they can with respect to what is going to or not going to happen here. So we were very fortunate at the last public hearing. The city provided us with their current plan, status, and costs of the project. However, I believe some things have changed since then. I do believe the current plan is still to go ahead with the peanut roundabout. Is that correct, Joel? Okay. And for that, the basis, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the basis for that is that, of course, we have those two intersections off of Burbank Road. And it makes it, there are some traffic backups when school starts in the morning and when school lets out, and then on Saturdays and Sundays during soccer season. And one of the questions that has come up is with respect to how much roundabout would alleviate that traffic, since we will still have the same number of people. Now, there's no question, and I did research, I did so much research on this topic, and I know that many other council members have too. There is a lot of support that roundabouts do in fact create a better traffic flow and do reduce accidents and injury accidents because they encourage people to go slow. I think a lot of concerns that people have right now is whether or not this is appropriate or whether this will work well in the area in which it is to be situated, with, again, the largest concerns being you have 3 schools in the vicinity now, and therefore there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. I'm very familiar with that area since I went part-time practicing law. God forbid I should get bored for a minute. I picked up substitute teaching. And so I have been in that intersection many mornings, and I have been in that intersection many afternoons after school has let out. I'm not going to comment on my experiences because my experiences are mine and yours are all yours. So what I'd like to talk about right now, and I'd like to give Joel about 5-10 minutes, or John Rice, our engineer, to talk about exactly, not the basis for the support of the current plan, but what, I know there have been some changes since the inception of the plan at the request of the citizens and at the request of council members. So what is the current status right now? How much property, for one thing, how much property are we looking to take from private property owners?
Well, I don't have those figures right in front of me, but it's fairly minimal. It's in line with other similar roadway projects. So it's, the most that we're taking is on the county parcel, and we've already discussed that with the commissioners, explained the whole project. They are on board with that. So they have the biggest impact of any individual property owner up there.
And when you say in line with other projects, would that be other projects here in the city or other projects elsewhere?
There'll be other projects here in the city whenever we've done other roundabouts or other roadway projects. It's typical that we need to get additional right-of-way, we need to get easements, so it's really nothing out of the ordinary compared to other projects that we've done in the past.
Okay, one of the,
I can elaborate a little bit, 'cause I think part of your question was I think you were getting at what changes have we made. So the first iteration of the design was simply to locate the roundabouts right in the center of the intersection. That would be, the first draft is just put them right there. That's where you get the least amount of changes you got to make, put them right there. But as some property owners came in and were concerned about that impact, that's when we started moving it. And we did several iterations of moving it south, moving it to the west. Now, as soon as you move it one way, then you're impacting the other corner. So, for instance, at Mr. Barnett's property, we tried to move it as far south and as far to the east, but the further east, then you're impacting the other side of the property. So we did probably, I don't know, John, 4 or 5 iterations to try to get it. So we moved it as far south and as far west as we could. And trying to limit as much encroachment on anybody's property as possible. Now, there's still some, just because of radiuses and things like that. So the bulk of that ended up, after all those iterations, on the Kinney property. Yeah, that's
which would
where
be the
bulk-
soccer fields.
Yeah, so that would be.
How many parking spaces will we be taking from the soccer fields?
We had that in a previous memo we sent.
Net, none, because we've committed to the county that for any parking space we take out, we'll replace. They've given us permission to extend the parking lot west and south. So net, there'll be as many parking spaces when all is said and done as there are now.
So that would be at the city's expense, we would have to replace those 28 parking spaces at the city's expense on the county property.
Correct.
Approximately how much would that cost?
Yeah, we had provided this a while back. I'm trying to remember what it was, because this question came up previously. Yeah, roughly, I just don't know the exact number of spots, but,
How
yeah.
much was that, Andre?
About 280,000, I'm guessing 10,000 spots.
Okay, so about $280,000 would be added to the project.
Am I close, John? I'm just being kind of-
I would say around 200, 250,000, yeah.
And I know that I reviewed all of the information that I could remember that I had in the packages and what the city was kind enough to send me. And do we know for sure if the county is donating that property or if we're buying that property from the county? I know there was some discussion about donations.
We haven't started the acquisition process yet as far as contacting property owners, so I do not know.
The county.
Okay, so if we had to purchase that from the county, what would the additional expenses be?
The county part, taking out the improvements, it's around 20 to 25,000 for the land value of the county parcel.
Okay. And with respect to the private property owners, what would be the expense to the city for acquiring their property?
It's around 30 to 35,000 for the remainder of the parcels.
Okay.
And the reason being, and like I said, we haven't started those negotiations yet, but sometimes we talk to a property owner, it's do we just pay for, a tree or a sidewalk replacement, or let them do it, or do we do it as part of the project? So that's all part of that negotiation, A property might say, hey, I want you to do it all as part of the project, so we just include it, that would adjust, anything we would actually, would pay for that,
So, yeah, these numbers are all pretty flexible,
Yeah.
I would say, not cast in stone.
I would say we're also, we tend to be generous, when we're due, because this is people's property, so we tend to, within reason, be generous.
But these are the appraised values that were done by an outside appraiser certified. So those are the fair market value prices.
And how many properties will be impacted?
There are 15 parcels that will be impacted.
Is that including the county or not?
That
including the
includes,
county?
yes, absolutely.
But several people own multiple parcels.
Yes.
The county's is 4, just for instance.
How many homeowners?
Yeah,
There's 14 total. 14, but you're
Yeah.
talking even tiny little pieces like .01, .005.
yeah. I know for sure there is one owner that has 2 parcels.
Okay.
And then the county, so yeah, like 13.
Okay. So, as I understand it right now, with respect to the current plan, what is this, the status now is that the plan has been completed, the design plan has been completed, correct?
Correct. It's like 90 or 95% complete. It's to the point that we have the construction limits, we know what our easements and right-of-way are, so that we can start the acquisition process. They are under review by the utility companies for utility conflicts. And so at this point, it's basically a matter of doing quantities and doing the remaining work in order to get it bid and constructible. But the plans are essentially done.
Okay. So one of the questions that came up quite a bit was with respect to how was it determined that we actually needed changes at this particular intersection? Now, I understand Joel and I corresponded back and forth today, and he gave me information from the one company that did the survey. But what I was looking for in particular was, what made this such a project that had to be done now? What were the incentives? What were the drivers of the project? Because a lot of people have said to me, and maybe to other council people as well, there really haven't been that many accidents up there, and as far as serious accidents as well. There are other intersections in the city that allegedly have greater accident and impact statistics.
Yeah, as far as the history of these intersections, this goes back, like in the early 2000s, when it was identified as a problematic intersection, really.
Who identified it? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't want to forget my questions either.
This would have been previous city engineers, going back even before Joel, and identified the congestion up there that was occurring at that time, and that because of development that was going on and continues up in that area, looking out to the future, it would continue to be an issue. And the big problem is just the configuration of those two intersections, how close they are. Of course, we've talked about this many times. And the traffic signals, there's just no good way to time them up to alleviate the congestion during the busy times of the day. So it was discussed way back then, and it's been on the radar for many, many years. And now with more development up there in that area, and with the roundabouts going in, it really seemed like the perfect solution for that intersection, which again has been on the radar for many, many years.
Okay, was there any in particular, were there more accidents there than had been there before? Or was this anticipatory by the city that we anticipate that there's going to be more congestion?
Well, yes, there is, I think everyone has experienced the congestion up there. And with the development, we all know that there's development coming up there. And with the development will come increased traffic. And so that will only get worse with time.
Okay, now a couple things with respect to the increased traffic. I know we do have an annexation issue on tonight's agenda where they're looking to put more housing in farther west. We've just put in a couple new housing projects farther west. How do you see that necessarily impacting this particular intersection?
If you're talking about the Graham annexation to the west, I don't know as if that will have much of an impact on this particular intersection, but there is more development in that immediate area that will certainly contribute to the traffic volume on Burbank Road.
What development is that?
Well, there's development planned for behind Lowe's, and there is some development planned in the safety center area.
Yeah, the Lowe's one that was purchased by a company that does apartments, and they've proposed anywhere from 300 and 320 units there behind Lowe's on Milltown. And then Weaver just got their approval to do a planned development up there in that area by Bueller's and that area, and that's 84 units there, which those, and then the Spring Run development, that's 100 homes that just got completed, were all facilitated by, basically we encouraged and put in infrastructure and did a TIF on purpose to try to facilitate housing, which was identified as a problem. So, council had the forethought at that time to do the TIF. We did the TIF, put in the utilities, improve some infrastructure, and if you build it, they will come, and the development happened, just like we were hoping it would. It's actually slightly ahead of schedule right now for that, and so we've sort of been anticipating an increased traffic anyway. But to go back a little bit, so it was the engineer prior to me, city engineer, that identified this. We've been doing 10-year infrastructure plans, strategic plans for 25 years, 25, 30 years. So this was on there, and it's a combination of things. It depends on the use of the road and the amount of traffic on the road. Is it an arterial, is it a minor collector, and things like congestion and accidents. So it's a bunch of things that come together that get you ranked on the list of where you would go. So it was back then with the traffic at that time, where the north end was less developed, no Myers, none of that stuff was up there. And none of those developments we just mentioned were there at the time. And at that time, it was warranted. And I actually, a couple years after that, so probably 2005 or between 2005 and 2010, I analyzed that intersection and tried to figure out a way to make it better, because we would get complaints about the traffic to congestion. We already knew it was bad as far as how that's measured by the standards that are out there, level of service, A, B, C, D. So I tried to realign the intersections, did all kinds of things. At that time, I couldn't get it to function in a way that would be acceptable. So it just stood there on that 10-year plan for a lot of years. Then this was probably 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, we started talking about the TIF for sure. But this has to move up, because we know. So we did all our traffic counts before all these developments had happened.
Well,
And at that time, so this was before Spring Run.
Right.
Was there.
I understand that. I mean, we have all the background, we have all the information. But one of my questions is, all the improvements that you've been talking about, all the development that you've been talking about, has been farther to the north and farther to the west. We've put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roundabouts farther to the west and farther to the north. Now, the intersection that we're talking about right now, there are only so many houses in that residential area, and there only will be so many houses in that residential area. There are the 3 schools, and the 3 schools can only hold so many children. And the levy did not pass, so the junior high is not going up there, at least not in the very near future. So, and one of the questions was that, we really haven't had a chance to see what those 2 intersections, the one at Milltown and, Oak Hill, and the one at Oak Hill and Oldman, how much impact that really has had with respect to traffic flow. So I guess my question is, I can understand the roundabouts in some of those places which really which where traffic will be going through quickly and which were a problem, but this is kind of a static area.
I would probably disagree with that. We've seen, because if you look back at the traffic data we shared previously, the traffic's just steadily increased. As developments happened at the north end and in the vicinity of that area, traffic's just continued to increase over the last 10 years.
I think you can say that about everywhere in the city.
Right, and so the design and the justification for the design was based on data from like 2 years ago. That's when we counted traffic, and that's when we had the poor level of service that backs cars up at times from the intersection all the way around down Winkler and all the way down Highland and all the way up north towards the Dix. That was as it was. So that was 2 years ago. That was the analysis. That's when we counted the cars.
Okay.
It's only going to be more traffic is my point. So it's
Well, and there's only
justified.
going to be more traffic anywhere in the city. One of the other things that I would like to point out is that, at least to my recollection, I don't remember this roundabout being talked about as part of the TIF project area. I think, I did not remember, and I looked back to my notes and didn't see that discussed at all when we were talking about the TIF, so.
We didn't talk about a roundabout, but we talked about the intersection being eligible, and the map in the TIF documentation goes all the way to that intersection, because we knew something. We want to just sort of have a placeholder, if this were to move forward, we would like to be able to use some TIF funds if available for the project.
I
We didn't talk
understand,
specifically
but-
about a roundabout that.
I understand, but that probably would have been a good thing to give a heads up to the council about, because I don't remember it ever coming up when we talked about the TIF program. I did look at the traffic studies and the statistics supporting the project. Without a doubt, there has been, general studies that roundabouts are safer, and they are safer. And there was the one study that the city had done that it would be safer to have this peanut roundabout here. But I will say that in all of the research and investigation I did, and I'm sure you feel the same way because you would have provided me anything to the contrary, we don't have a lot of information with respect to a single lane peanut roundabout in this type of an area.
We shared several examples
Well,
where those do.
I'll get to those. There was one in North Ridgeville, which is not near necessarily a residential area, and there is one there are several. There are 2, I believe, in Ohio that are near schools. One is in Dublin and one is in Hilliard, and there have in fact been some issues that I researched and found that there were some issues about pedestrians in particular, kids walking back and forth to school. And one of the things is that they had their roundabouts put in and were used to roundabouts at that time. One of the concerns that I have, and I don't know if I just get to the roundabouts at the wrong time, but I've seen people get to a roundabout and turn left to go on the left road. I've seen people stop at the roundabout. I've seen people not be able to get off the roundabout, just keep going round and round, and so, I mean, that's one of the concerns that has been raised with respect to having sufficient data for something like a peanut roundabout where there is a very high pedestrian traffic.
So first of all, I just want to make sure, because we started out when we proposed this back in May of last year and again in February, of trying to make it clear that a peanut roundabout is just an elongated roundabout. It functions the same. All the studies and all of that apply to these. It's just a little bit elongated. You could actually make the argument when you have a peanut, you have a longer length in two sections between the roads coming in and out, so you have more time for vehicles to see and more time for pedestrians to see vehicles coming on two of those legs than you would on a typical roundabout.
Let me
So-
ask you this, what is the plan for pedestrians on the current proposal?
Yeah.
Where would crosswalks be? Would there be lights that people could hit and they would flash when someone's at the crosswalk? I mean, we tried that at the college, that did not work out really well.
So you-
Because nobody
you
can
go
get their
back,
face
yeah.
out of their phones.
John, in his documentation that he shared, his memo,
One of these.
it would be I think, yeah, those are all the examples. Go back earlier, I think you had it in there earlier. There you go.
There we go. So there's actually going to be the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. These are like the ones at Artiflex on Bowman Street or like at Wooster Brush on South Beaver Street that flash. Those will be on the north leg. And then there will be actually offset crosswalks. So they're going to be offset or staggered.
How do you mean offset or staggered?
So if you look here, so they're not going to be a line. They're not going to be straight across. So this way, a person crossing has to come down, and then they have to shift over and cross.
Why?
Make it harder for blind people.
Make it easier.
So actually,
for the-
that's in purpose for people.
Yeah.
And that's a recommended standard for safety for pedestrians and for the visually impaired. And if you go around Cincinnati or a lot of areas, you'll see those. So specifically for that reason. The other thing about roundabouts and pedestrian crossings is the crossing is a little bit further away than the center of the intersection where a typical intersection would be. Most of the accidents we see with pedestrians and vehicles at intersections are failure to yield. I mean, somebody doesn't stop at the red light, somebody's walking across, they think, no, somebody's gonna stop and they don't. That's usually the types of things that happen. In this case, where their crossing is further away, they only cross one lane of traffic, they only have to look the one way because there's only ever gonna be traffic coming in one direction at any one time, rather than multiple lanes and multiple.
And that's
so you go
because
across-
there's an island in the middle.
And there's
They
a
have to
middle-
stop at the
correct.
island. I watched a video from, I think it was Hilliard Schools, and, yeah, it was pretty interesting. Kids would run across the street, get to the island, then run off the island and get to the other sidewalk. What if we just put the intersections now farther away? But I don't think that's a problem. I don't think the pedestrian traffic is a problem right now. I think the reason for this that I understand is the traffic backup.
Correct. Congestion is the largest reason for this because it backs up, congests the intersection so you can't get through. And then also, because they're so close together, that's what the other alternative we looked at was turn lanes. And you can't, there's not enough room to put turn lanes for the amount of traffic that backs up there. So if you've ever been up there, you'll see it like backed all the way through, all the way down, people sitting there, in the intersection, down Winkler. I've watched that myself several times, or all the way back up.
That's generally after school.
Yeah, at the peak
Things-
hour. Any intersection we design in the city, whether it's signalized or roundabout, is based on peak hour traffic.
Absolutely. And I guess the consideration would be how long does that last? How much of a problem is it? Again, as I said, with subbing, I've been up there before school, after school. But again, it's not my opinion. It's what people find, that if it is more congested and for a significant period of time. I know that there were some problems at Edgewood a few years ago with people parking up the streets and where they shouldn't have been parking, and you know, I talked to the police department, I talked to the city, and the response was, well, it only lasts for a short amount of time, so we're not going to put in no parking signs and things like that. And playing devil's advocate, I guess I'm asking the same thing. If it only lasts for a short period of time, I guess I could point to the Milltown and Route 3 where I almost always have to sit through a light there.
That might be a good place for another roundabout in the future. I don't know about that one. We haven't analyzed it for that, but that is also on our radar as one that we need to, it is on the radar right now to, because we've been evaluating it and moving up the list, knowing it has a lot of backup there. And it really is, that's when it really shows up, is when you have construction on other roads, people take that road, and that's when that one really backs up over good.
And we always have construction on other roads, which
So-
is good. We should. We're, fixing our roads. So I would like to talk for a little bit of time, and then I want to open it up to my other committee members and my council members, and then once we've had these discussions, I'll open it up to the public if there's enough time. But one of the biggest concerns that I've heard of is the question about pedestrian traffic. And I researched to find safety statistics and anything that I could that would show that it's safer when you have a roundabout. And I guess what I hear from many people, and it's a major concern of mine, is we have these crosswalks that you have to jump to an island and then on another crosswalk, and we have flashing lights, but my experience with the flashing lights and the crosswalks have been up at the college, and I don't know about you folks, but this is what I see constantly, and just people walking out in front of traffic. Their noses are in their phones, even if they hit the light, they just walk. And these are almost adult children. It concerns me that we have a school for the developmentally disabled right there, we have an elementary school right there, we have a high school where we have kids that are in their phones all the time, and we also have new drivers as well, that is kind of a concern. So those are some things that I'd like the city to talk about. I mean, how are we going to ensure the safety of pedestrians and bike riders? Because the other thing I looked at was on the peanut roundabouts, or the elongated roundabouts, where there were bike trails adjacent, and I didn't see any
So-
in Ohio.
Yep, Delaware, Ohio, there's a peanut roundabout with a bike path, with a school, and with, right adjacent there, their high school,
Right there.
and the residential right next to it. And that was in,
Right
that's the
there.
one John just sent late last week. Dublin is the
And that's
next,
relatively new.
and there's, I'm not sure when that one was. About 4 years
Yeah.
ago. So it's been there for a little while. Then there's Dublin, which also has a school, high school next to it, and some residential next to it. Very similar, like I said, a roundabout or a peanut or function the exact same way. Then Kent State University, way more traffic, way more pedestrians, and they've got a series of roundabouts and a series of signalized controlled intersections. So they actually went back and did a study. So more vehicular traffic than we have here, more pedestrians than we have here. And they compared these over a period of time. And the roundabouts had one pedestrian accident out of almost 6,500 pedestrians, whereas the signals had 5 out of only 784. So it's not a lot overall, but significantly different and significantly safer based on the studies they did there, which is way more pedestrians and way more vehicles than we have at this intersection here. So,
And then aside from these examples, we've shared brochures from ODOT, FHWA about the safety, the increased safety with
Right.
roundabouts for bicyclists and pedestrians.
Right.
In addition to vehicles.
And I'm actually very familiar with the intercity roundabouts at Kent. And I would argue those are a little bit different. I've talked to, anecdotally, people who have kids in Hilliard and Dublin, and there are a lot of concerns for their children as far as that goes. And I know the studies and I know ODOT is paying for a lot of this, although ODOT is not paying for a lot of it as well. And this is going to be a significant cost to the city. So, we, of course, would like to make sure that it's money well spent and it doesn't put anybody in danger. One of the things that was brought up, and it was brought up at the last council meeting by a resident, but it had been brought up before, and this is, and we do have, I think, our police chief and our fire chief both here, because we have the city safety building up there. Now, this will be a one-lane elongated roundabout. And my question would be, with respect to getting, during busy times, getting a vehicle, a service vehicle through there. I mean, you've got 2 lanes, but you've then got 2 islands on either side, and how would you get through?
Are you asking me?
I am, Chief Sally.
Since we have the bigger vehicles, I guess I can speak for both Matt and I. I believe that they're going to go through more effectively because they're flowing traffic. The problem that we see now is that we're traveling down the main corridor and it all gets congested and everything gets bunched up and there's not a lot of places to move. And with the roundabouts, traffic is flowing so they can flow out past the roundabout areas, merge to the side where they're supposed to, and allow us to get out and free up that area where when it is congested in peak times, it's just gridlocked, stuck, and we have more delays in that. The spacing, from a size perspective, there's sufficient space to go around it. There's sufficient, they're built to be able to drive over if we need to in that capacity. I did some anecdotal testing myself by following the ladder truck around roundabouts as they're driving to see how they would be impacted if there was any concerns, from our driver safety and getting around, and we didn't see that. So I do not foresee an issue with a roundabout in comparison to any type of intersection. Any area that is gridlocked creates problems and potential other traffic accident opportunities because of people scrambling. If they flow, it is always better in my opinion.
So that would be also a matter of educating the public that usually the first thing we do is stop when we hear a siren and stop when we hear an emergency vehicle. What happens if people stop in the intersection, in the roundabout? How would the safety vehicles get through?
Based on this configuration, it seems that there is sufficient space for them to go around if they stop. And if they're stopping and merging to the right, then being able to go over any portion of the peanut island, the middle island, is sufficient for us to be able to get around them if they do freeze.
Majority of the width around there, in the roundabout itself, is the equivalent of 3 lanes of traffic between outside curb to inside curb. Now, that's why they're paved a little different, because you want people to stay in the 1 lane. But in the event that there is an accident or somebody stops, there's plenty of room. I just happened, didn't plan it, I was going north on the roundabout at Oldman and Oak Hill a couple weeks ago, and a truck had lost its wheel in the middle of the roundabout and was over by the curb in the lane of the roundabout. Another large pickup truck had stopped, pulled off on the inside to try to help them out. There was no obstruction of traffic. Everybody continued to flow because there was plenty of room for that third car to get in between those 2 vehicles and go, and the one over on Oldman and Oak Hill.
And I think what we're talking about is the area in red in that drawing. That's the portion that you don't want people to use for regular driving. That's available to emergency vehicles, anybody else that needs more extra space.
Is that the slanted area that's kind of off the
No, the
roundabout?
slanted is in the middle area, then there's curb down, and then there's a wide paved area, concrete, and then a smaller curb to the paved area that's the normal lane of traffic.
Okay. I'd like to open it up to other committee members and other council members who have questions and concerns.
I
Chris?
would like to start, because
Sure.
we're talking about the flow. Have we studied, if we're going to flow through this roundabout, what's going to happen at the light at 83 Friendsville, Burbank? that traffic's already backed up almost to the roundabout during heavy flow of traffic. If we put a roundabout in there and we're trying to flow, we're stopping even further back now. So have we studied all of the intersections that we're trying to move to?
And you're going to increase that traffic faster down to
To
Highland.
it, yes. Both sides, Highland and North.
So right now, I'm pretty sure, Kurt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the bigger impact on that particular intersection is the corridor from there going north along, all the way up through the shopping centers and all that stuff. So that is all coordinated to a degree as you go up there, because that traffic's way more than the traffic on that piece of Burbank or Friendsville there, I guess. So, that's
I would
gonna have a
happen
bigger
to
impact.
disagree. I would want to study on that because I've sat at that light 3 times
Yeah.
trying to make a left-hand turn.
It's another bad.
And as soon as you get across it, you're stopped again. And that's very, very common. I think we've all run into that. Highland as well, if we're going south, we're stopped up there all the time. I mean,
Those
I live there.
those are activated, so it will adjust. It will be adjusted if it's needed.
And I agree with you. I also disagree that we have a high-traffic problem. I watched 7 buses come up Winkler, make a right-hand turn, make a left-hand turn, and go to the school without stopping. 7 buses. So anybody that lives there, we can film it for you, whatever you need. I don't think we've done enough study of the flow that we're going to create to stops that are already very congested. So I would like that piece of information if possible.
We can spend more money and do a larger analysis.
Well, we have money in the budget now.
No, I
so,
know, I
yeah,
just want to make
we
sure you'd
can-
be okay with that, if we were gonna,
Well, you don't have to ask to spend that money. There's $100,000 there that's already in the budget for this. So if that's what needs to be done, collaboratively, we need to discuss that.
'Cause
We
what
don't need to
hap-
get mad at each other. We just need to discuss it. That's all.
Mr. Malta, because what happens if on a congested morning, because right now this, I'm playing the devil's advocate for the, for this, is if that traffic is really congested and it's going all on Burbank, now you got Edgewood buses lined up on Winkler.
Yeah,
They can't get out.
correct.
Because now you have continuous traffic.
Correct.
Now you got buses on Oldman, and that continuous traffic is just moving. Now they can't get out, and now they don't have now they don't have a light that can stop that traffic and allow them out.
so Mike, that's not what the analysis that we provided with you says. We actually analyzed that, and we have the engineer from CSO here, we also have ODOT represented here if you'd like to ask really detailed questions of them. But the analysis we sent you, if you remember this, we gave you some samples out of that. It looked exactly at that, to look at how would that flow based on all the traffic coming from all the directions, and it eliminates that. So, would every once in a while, somebody have to yield while somebody's in there? Sure, but you're not gonna see the backup there, as you do now, where you got over 300 feet in some directions.
I would challenge that to a degree, because a bus is not going to move at the same speed as a car, and getting a bus up and moving up the hill out of Winkler to get out onto that roundabout and trying to get into that traffic is different in that flow of traffic. So I understand what the study says, but the study may not take into consideration what the real-life traffic movement may look like of those buses.
Well, they can correct me if I'm wrong, the engineer designed it, but they are purposely designed to slow all vehicles down to 20 miles an hour, so they should be all going about the same speed as they're entering into the roundabout. That's part of the reason they're safer, because you have to go slow to enter and exit a roundabout.
And I can understand slowing it down, but you're still going to have the same traffic coming through during those busy times. And so you are still going to have where you can't get into that roundabout because there's a lot of traffic.
So that's not what the study shows, and that's why we did the detailed analysis, and actually spent a little extra money to do a little more analysis when some of the questions came up there. So, I mean, like I said, ODOT, the design engineer's here, if you wanted to ask specific questions about that.
Mr. Malta, did you have any other questions? No. I wanted to jump in. And I think that maybe we're over-prioritizing this. I'm not against roundabouts. I want to make that perfectly clear. this doesn't feel like a safety concern, and we've all admitted this is more of a convenience because of congestion. But I think my biggest question, and it was kind of raised, is why we're married to a double roundabout that is going to take private property. When we've already said that we're going to take county property, we're already going to replace parking spots. Why can't we figure something out where it's a single roundabout, move that thing more towards the county property and leave the private owners of it? Now, I believe you have a study for that, and I believe that you're going to tell me it's not as good of an option. However,
It'll cost more too.
I understand. However, when we're dealing with private property owners, and even though I know you've all said we're only taking a couple of feet, these are not large front lawns. A couple of feet is just bringing cars that much closer to their yards. And so if there is an option to where we can just take the homeowners completely out of the equation, I think that it would at least behoove us to consider that option. And I think it's a compromise to where you guys absolutely, I understand your stance. You want a roundabout to get this thing moving and help the traffic flow. I think that there's some of us that are just very much like, for me, when we're talking about that many property owners that are going to be forced to get eminent domain out of their property, to have cars get that much closer to their homes, and we are just completely discarding a potential option that can just completely eliminate that from the process, that just rubs me the wrong way a bit.
So that's not true. Like I said, we did multiple iterations to try to limit the impact. I can't remember in my 25 years at the city, any roadway or intersection improvement project where we didn't have to take some property, or a bike path for that matter. Our intent is never to have to take and do eminent domain. We're going to negotiate. And on every project I've ever done, if there is somebody that's unwilling, it's usually a very small minority, one or two. You've seen that on recent projects that have come. So we try to do that as much as possible, eliminate or limit the amount of taking that we're doing, and just because we are very sensitive, that's a legitimate concern. We don't want to have to do that. But there is a bike path in between the road as well, so it's a pretty wide area. And I would say it's going to be slower going in and out of those when a roundabout's there, so the cars will be moving slower in front of those than they do when the light's green up there. At times, people definitely don't go the speed limit. You don't have a choice when you're approaching a roundabout. You have to slow down.
And I reiterate my point that I'm not against a roundabout. I am trying to advocate for the private property owners that may not want to give up that land. And so, again, I continue to just say, although it may not be as easy and it may not be as cost effective, it would have, I remember the meeting. You kind of flashed it up on the thing, this is no good, and you moved it on. It was never really presented to us as an option. And I think that as council, we would appreciated it as an option to at least consider. I understand, to an engineer's eye, this peanut it's straight through, you're taking a few feet here and there, and it's nice and neat. But again, my point is advocating for constituents, and of course, some constituents are saying the roundabout is much more important. I'm in this point where I'm trying to balance between convenience on a roadway and private property owners' rights. And so I'm trying to help with that. And I'm sorry, Phil, I'm going to make my statement. I'm going to move on to some other folks here. But I want to make sure that I make my stance there. I'm not against roundabout, but I would just like to find a compromise that we can all get what we want out of this, so that we're not in this situation where we have this big divide and there's this great anger between everybody, that there could be a potential solution that everybody's satisfied with. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll kick it over to any of my other colleagues that want to jump in.
The last thing that's on this agenda before we open it up to the public is there's been some discussion about a potential moratorium on this project, which is why it fell under Laws and Ordinances Committee this evening. I think that that's, the law director and I have discussed this. We don't necessarily see eye to eye on it. We have different interpretations of the law, which is why we have lawyers. And so the question then becomes, can we in fact legally do a moratorium on this project until we get the safety concerns adequately resolved? That's something that council is looking at. It's something that we're doing research on. There's no law necessarily on this exact subject area. And so Andrea and I are going back and forth with that. Go ahead, Andrea.
So I guess and we had our discussion, and I agree, there's not case law specific to this situation where this is more of a separation of powers issue. And the law that I would say would prohibit a moratorium in this instance would be the city's own charter. And it's the section 2.18 of the city's charter, where it basically says, I have it over here, neither council nor its committees shall in any manner take part is the discipline of, nor give orders to any subordinates and employees in the administrative service of the municipality responsible to the mayor. And what that means is what I've said, when I had issued my legal opinion, it's the questions that are coming, out tonight. Those are great discussions to have between council and administration. Those are not reasons for a moratorium, especially when, council doesn't have that authority under the city's charter to oversee, stop the day-to-day operations of administration. And that's where you and I know,
How does that infringe,
we
how does that
have-
infringe on the operations, if you could explain that to me?
Sure, the day-to-day operations, that is specifically administration's role. So council authorizes, go forward with designing and reviewing, this project, and administration does that day-to-day. It's under the mayor, their employees, that are doing those day-to-day operations. Council, you're there as legislative, you're gonna authorize funds, the city brings forward its projects that it wants to proceed with, and you as council, you can vote in favor of or against.
May I ask a question? Is the legislative body permitted to propose legislation within the city?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
so, and I'm not arguing in favor or against, it's just more procedural.
Sure.
So if this body were to propose a moratorium, would that not be a piece of legislation that the mayor could veto, in fact?
So my job to step you there, though, as legal counsel, as the law director, is to make sure that the city is moving forward with lawful legislation. And so that's where I stopped and said, this moratorium concerns is not legally valid, enforceable, it's unconstitutional under the city's charter. But if you still proceed, I'm legal counsel, law director, you guys, city as a whole is the client, you proceed with the moratorium, the mayor absolutely, if he wants to give it a level of legitimacy, it could be up for veto. It could be treated as, the body, you could decide, okay, there's a moratorium in place, and decide that you're going to, believe that it has powers to enforce anything. But my perspective and what I've shared, and is now out there, is, no longer attorney-client privilege. My concern is that's not valid, enforceable, it's unconstitutional, and it would have no effect. So if you put a moratorium on, it doesn't impact the day-to-day operations of the city.
So your recommendation, wait a minute, your recommendation is, since we control the budget, is just don't fund it, right?
Absolutely, vote no.
All right, well, that's what we'll do. I think the meeting can be
And see-
concluded.
Well, there's
Yeah.
nothing.
We're not going to fund it.
Yeah, there's nothing to present right now, and I think the schedule we proposed wasn't until 27 anyway.
Right.
At this point.
And Bob,
So
I will
the only
continue
money
to
we've
respond to
spent has basically been the money that council authorized to do the design on this up to this.
Right. And I would just like to respond that I don't see this necessarily, I don't see this as a violation of the Constitution or the law or the articles for the city. If this would be, then I would have to argue the moratorium for the dispensaries was just as unlawful as this would be. And yet, the city brought that to us, and we passed that with no issue.
And not-
So I think there are just different ways legally to look at it. And so we see things differently.
And I just want to interrupt real quick, just interject on the marijuana dispensaries. That was state law that came in, and it specifically
understand
allowed
that, and you and I
for cities,
discussed that.
to decide under their home rule powers how they wanted to proceed. And moratoriums, I'm not saying council can never impose a moratorium. Clearly, that is a council power when it is for a public purpose, and projects such as that. But it was under the city's zoning powers and those, the state law that specifically provides for municipalities to determine how they want to do with a new law that's coming into place. And that's where moratoriums are generally used, where you've got a new law, you need to freeze something, see how permits are going to be handled, that kind of
Well,
process.
actually, the way that came up is it was under existing law because people were interested in using our existing zoning so you and I differ on that point. But, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor?
Just a question for clarification. You talked about the idea, you've proposed an idea of a 3-year moratorium.
I haven't proposed it. I prepared it, but it's been,
Whose proposal was that? Is that a group proposal, or?
what was your question? I mean, I don't know that I'm not going to be put on the point on the defensive about this. Where did it come from and who did it come from? So what exactly is your question, other than where did it come
Put
from
that
and who did
history
it come
aside.
from?
With regards to the 3-year moratorium, is it the understanding that this council can prevent future councils from acting on it during the period of that moratorium?
Well, it's no different from the dispensary.
Or, well, and with the dispensary, I think with the marijuana dispensaries, I think we talked about this at the time it was enacted. This council, or any future council, always had the right to modify that, lift it, extend it,
Sure.
whatever.
This would be no different.
So if you voted tonight to put on the moratorium for 3 years, this council could vote next meeting to lift that moratorium.
Any council could.
Okay, so I guess I'm curious, since you've got the right to vote to not fund it, what does the moratorium accomplish if future council, when it comes time to act on it, has a piece of legislation, whether it be for eminent domain or whatever, if this council or future council decides they want to go forward with it, do we just have to insert the words in the legislation, lifting the moratorium and doing such and such? I guess I don't know what the practical impact of a moratorium would be.
Well, it was just something we raised for discussion, and I think the practical impact would be that, quite frankly, instead of getting something put in front of a future council and say, this is a really good idea, then they have to stop and think about, why was it put in place? What are the questions? What should I be asking? I mean, we have 2 new council members coming in the next session, and they can decide to do that. But I can guarantee you, we've all been sitting here through the entirety of this project, and we still have questions. I can't imagine what questions they would have as well. So with that, and I apologize to the public, you can please stay for discussion after our council meeting.
Ms. Knappich, in light of the fact that everybody's here, and we did this the last time when we had the presentation from the administration that ran 60 minutes out of a 60-minute meeting, we're already on YouTube right now broadcasting this, so I guess at this point, we might as well just keep moving and let the public have the opportunity to speak, because we kind of stifled that the last time.
All right, if we could, if you're fine with that as council president, I'm fine with that. Let's go with a 2-minute speech.
Okay, good evening. My name is Rebecca Foster. I live at 3355 Oak Hill Road. I live between the last 2 new roundabouts. I live between Oldman and Milltown, so I lived through the construction phase of everything. I will tell you, the city had to buy some of my property. They negotiated very fairly. They gave fair market value or more for the property that they had to buy from me. I wasn't happy at the beginning because they took about 12 to 15 feet of my trees because I live in the woods. Is my property better for it? Yes, it is. So I do want to say one comment about the new roundabout. If this page was put up to show the minimal amount of property that they're taking from the residents, this is minimal. And for the benefit of the city and the traffic and the safety, I think they've done a fabulous job laying this out and pushing it to take the property from the county. I mean, there is one little swath of property on the northeast corner for this resident that maybe they could push it a little farther and not take as much land from this person here. And I'm sorry, I don't know the residents' names, but my whole life I was a construction engineer. I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I knew I worked with the city when they did mine up there, and I'm in favor of it. I'd just like to see a little more engineering to take less from this one resident.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ted Hill, I live at 735 Bell Avenue here in Worcester. Thank you in particular to Mr. Sanders for allowing the public to speak. That is very generous of you to give some of the council's time. I am a citizen of Worcester. I'm a parent. I'm somebody who is quite involved in the school system, enough that I'm actually seeking public office with the school board. With that as background, I think the thing that strikes me is the risk to the different age levels as far as pedestrians and children in this area. We have everything from elementary school students to more adult students with some disabilities. We have residents that are blind. We have high schoolers and middle school students who are not known for their good judgment. They need hard rules, flashing lights, red, green, basics. The ability to accommodate school traffic in this situation, I think, is a security risk, in my opinion, a safety risk to these children. That safety risk must trump convenience. As far as I understand it, there are no great accidents that are in play here for this intersection. That is not the concern. That was the concern on Oak Hill and Milltown. There were occasionally bad accidents there. On Oak Hill and Oldman, there are very few pedestrians. We need to have that level of safety assured before we deal with convenience. To Mayor Reynolds' question to the council, if I can provide some citizen perspective. The reason to enact a moratorium is to communicate to the city administration the will of the public, even though it can be reversed legislatively afterwards. That is all.
Thank you very much.
My name is Nicole Williams. I currently work in Wayne County as the Executive Director of the Mental Health and Recovery Board for Wayne Homes, but I'm in personal capacity. I enjoy working here every single day, and I also shop and eat and enjoy everything here. I know that we've talked about safety, but 90% reduction in fatality crashes, 75% reduction in injury crashes, and 35% reduction in all other overall crashes. And that comes from studies from the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety as well as the Federal Highway Administration. And this one study in particular, it's not a motive other than saving lives, because the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, they obviously want fewer claims. But then if we look at concern for pedestrians, school children, and buses, the design of modern roundabouts improves safety for them. Pedestrians only have to cross one direction of slow-moving traffic at a time, using the island as a refuge in the middle. This is far safer than crossing multiple lanes of traffic looking both ways. For school buses, modern roundabouts are specifically engineered to accommodate all large vehicles, from fire trucks to buses, ensuring they can navigate them safely. The design for roundabouts forces drivers to slow down to 15 to 25 miles per hour. The Federal Highway Administration and IIHS constantly cite lower vehicle speeds as a primary reason for improved safety outcomes. For pedestrians, this is crucial. A crash at 20 miles per hour is far more you're going to survive than a 40 mile per hour. This slower speed also gives drivers more time to see and yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk. The islands shorten the length of a crosswalk, reducing the amount of time a pedestrian is exposed to traffic. Furthermore, a traditional intersection has numerous points where vehicles can cross paths with pedestrians. Roundabouts simplify these movements and make it easier for both drivers and pedestrians to anticipate each other's actions.
That's
According to the
time.
Guide of Safe,
That's time.
I was gonna talk about safe routes to safe national partnerships. The amount, I got it in my letter, but it's all about school safety.
Thank you, appreciate that.
I'll give it to somebody.
That would be great. Now, give us
Lots of facts,
copies.
and I cited all at the bottom.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. I'm gonna keep it short tonight. I may speak later, I don't know. 6:45 to 6:40, a police car went by my house. I was an accident. 60 miles per hour. 60 miles per hour. Straight down. Let's see them do that through Pena. Simple as that. I don't know if they were going to a robbery, if another police officer needs assistance. You're gonna put a damper on our response time. I'm not saying they won't be able to get around, but they won't be going 60, I guarantee you that. So I guess we have no concern for our safety department. That'll be fine.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that? Since it was directed at me. As much as I do appreciate your concerns on safety, I am the fire chief. I'm not gonna speak for Chief Fisher, but I do not want my crews going that fast responding to emergencies. We evaluate our response times. It falls in our policy that we're effectively responding to the community at a safe level. Because
Isn't that
Okay,
15 miles per
whoa,
hour?
Gentlemen, this is just for public comment. Let's leave the discussion. You guys can go outside and that's fine.
Okay.
Next
We want to
person.
make sure that the safety vehicles are not creating additional hazards by exceeding
We
law.
understand that. Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it's a safe response in conjunction with appropriate response times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Roger Kovalar, retired city engineer, 2114 Oak Hill Road. I'm in favor of the roundabout. I would also like to add that very good talk about pedestrians. Since I'm retired, I ride my bike a lot, I walk a lot. I go around those roundabouts 4 or 5 times a week. I've never had a problem with it. Okay, crossing with my bike or just walking across, the Oldman and Oak Hill roundabout, I actually ride my bike around the roundabout to get back on the trail. I've not had a problem. Sometimes you have to pay attention to the cars, but anytime you cross, you have to pay attention. I also agree that it's 1 lane you're crossing, it's not 2 lanes. So it's a lot easier to cross. Even with the stagger, that would even be better. That being said, okay, so I know they've made all the reasonable design changes to the plans so that it minimizes the right-of-way takes. I mean, Joel was talking about 0.01 acres. You know, that's my fingernail. You know, so I see that's not a problem. As far as the financing goes, I think it's great if you do the TIF, and you get some state grant funding, that would be good. And also, I know you've already approved a year ago, $130,000 or so to design this thing. So we're just gonna throw that money away. Just curious.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My name is Doug Greens. I'm a resident up on Highland, right off the Highland on Wellesley Avenue. So I'm in that area. And I'm not against roundabouts either. I think they're a good thing most of the time. I especially like the one that you put in on Friendsville Road and so forth. I think that was needed and it does a good job. But there's hardly any people walking over there. And that's one of my concerns because I live in an area where I see high school students walking, middle school students walking all the time. And I go through that intersection at least once a day, many times twice a day. And sometimes, quite often, when it's when those school buses, the school's letting out, and the school buses are doing it. Sometimes it's on Saturday when the soccer fields are busy. And my feeling is that, yes, sometimes it gets a little bit congested. I had to wait one day on a Saturday for the soccer fields. Took me about 4 minutes to get through that intersection. I want to say, why are we in such a hurry? I mean, why do we have to zoom through that intersection? Yes, it does get a little bit congested, but it's only at certain times for only a short period of time. And for that reason, I don't think that this roundabout is really that necessary. Perhaps if we could figure out how to time those lights a little better, and now with computers, I think we should be able to figure that out. Maybe there could be some adjustments of that sort that would help that intersection. And finally, I do think that I'm concerned about the students going across that road. Oftentimes I see, as I'm going down there, I see students trying to get across the road when it's busy, and they'll run out in front of traffic. Sometimes I think that that is not the best thing that we can do, is to put crosswalks there. They need lights. They need a light that says green, walk, you can walk, and all the traffic is stopped.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Gage Ryder. I live at 1520 Redwood in Worcester, Ohio. I moved to Worcester about 5 years ago, so I grew up in Columbus. I'm very familiar with roundabouts. Almost every development, you're going to have a roundabout, so I've drove them from the age of 16 to now. What I would say to address some comments, one was directed at the fire department. My father's a firefighter, and the number one thing that slows down the fire department is congestion. So a roundabout has improved that. So that's one of the things that he's touched on. I asked him what his thoughts were. So that's one of the things I wanted to address, as well as my brother's a police officer. Roundabouts have helped him as well. All emergency vehicles, it helps. In terms of safety, the statistics are there. There's been talk about convenience. One of the things I would ask, at least council is, does it take one accident to implement a roundabout? One serious accident. I understand there's convenience, but as I understand, the city's job is to work on improvements for the future, not just address the issues now. So I foresee that being an issue, especially at that congestion point where it's located, and I really appreciate council asking very hard questions tonight. And I just want to thank you all, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, I'm Julie Cicello, I'm from ODOT, so is it okay if I speak? I'm not the public, so.
Yes.
Okay. So just to address a few things, so, the city has contacted me to help them, with these changes that have been recommended, especially for pedestrians. Doing a lot of research, for the blind, right? There was that question the last time at our last meeting. That's what's recommended, what they're doing now. They changed the plans to have the staggered crosswalk through the Splitter Island area. That's also beneficial too, because when you do the staggered crosswalk through the Splitter Island, you're moving the pedestrians further away from the roundabout, so that gives the cars more time to see that pedestrian before they get to that first person. So it helps two things, not only visually impaired, but also just the children crossing as well. You mentioned Hilliard. They're familiar with Hilliard as well. I actually talked to the city engineer earlier this year when Joel and John first contacted me. She said that they've had one pedestrian crash that just happened earlier this year, one pedestrian crash in 18 years at their roundabouts. They've had multiple pedestrian crashes at their other intersections around their schools. This is just all school kids I'm talking about. As you know, you mentioned it, that there's 5 roundabouts right by their schools, and they are multi-lane roundabouts, lots of traffic. I think they have probably 40,000 vehicles or more that go through those roundabouts every single day. So much more traffic, double lanes, and as you mentioned, there's videos on YouTube that Hilliard has put out there. You can see examples of them crossing and how the crosswalks are staggered in the Splitter Island, if you want an example of what they look like. Roundabouts, I also I live here, my kids went to schools here, all 3 of them, kindergarten through graduation. Played soccer at soccer fields, so I'm very familiar with the congestion as well. Yeah, this roundabout is one of the best things to address the offset intersections. There's not much you can do, Joel mentioned it, there's only so much you can do with signal timing. We know that, they know that, there's not much you can do with that intersection as it is today. You're gonna continue to see the congestion. Burbank Road is a corridor that gets you from the north end to downtown. So yeah, a lot of the newer housing maybe is to the west, but people who come to those soccer fields from out of the city of Worcester, they're gonna, between games, they're gonna go up to the north end, get some food, go downtown, get some food, they're back and forth on Burbank Road, so, as they mentioned, that traffic's just gonna continue to increase, and you're gonna continue to see more and more issues there.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Owens. I live at 251 Home Drive. I am one of the 2 folks who hopes to sit in Scott's seat come next year. And I don't want to beat the roundabout itself anymore. Everybody, has offered their opinions, their feelings. I more want to talk about the process. I appreciate the thought behind the moratorium of like it will give people like me or like Harry future questions to ask. But if you guys don't want it, just say no, right? Don't kick it to us in the future. If you do have things that you're like, hey, in the future, you should ask these, leave that for us. Leave that documentation. Maybe change things around so when the city comes with, hey, we've got this bright new shiny roundabout we want to talk about, they have to address X, Y, Z things, so that way it doesn't feel like we've just streamed past it, right? So that's where I'm at. I think the process matters a lot of, how we get somewhere is almost as important as where we get to.
And that's exactly why we're having this meeting tonight. It's,
Exactly.
we have no desire to kick anything down, kick the can down the road. We just want to make sure that all of the significant questions get answered before we are called upon to make a decision. Thank you.
Very well said. I'm Carrie Snyder, I'm 1226 North Beaver Street. So I actually, maybe apparently the only person who's had, my daughter had an accident at that intersection. She was 16, new driver. The light was malfunctioning, which seemed to be happening pretty frequently. And to be honest, coming into this meeting this evening, I didn't really know how I felt about the roundabout. I had a pretty open mind about it. I didn't think that a single accident there meant that this had to be the way to handle it, but when I saw the way the property impact was minimized by the plan, that I was impressed by that, because that was one of my concerns. But, so anyway, my 16-year-old was T-boned. It was her fault. She pulled out in front of somebody with the light malfunctioning. She had the flashing red, he had a yellow. But thankfully, it was not at a high enough speed to cause her bodily harm, but her car was totaled. So that was unfortunate, but we're assuming that the current intersection, it is still dangerous, and especially when the light issues do happen once in a while where those are flashing. So, so I do appreciate that this is being thoroughly reviewed, but I would say that I'm in favor of it just due to the way the plan's been handled and to see it. And to be honest, so I have 6 children that have either are currently in high school or have gone through high school, and I have sat at that light and been down by Children's Services. And I will say that there's a number of tardies that have resulted from that that backup. So we have personally been in that, like, let's hurry to school kind of thing, and it didn't make it in time. So, but thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Drew Paul. I live at 1587 Summerlin Drive. Might sound familiar to Councilman Abernathy. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. A couple things that I've noticed this evening. Number one, there's a lot of talk about the location itself, but I do think that there needs to be further discussion about the greater effects of the community as a whole. I'm concerned about response times. I want to know that we have the opportunity to increase our response times because people living south of Highland are going to depend on emergency vehicles coming down Burbank and not being stopped if they need emergency service. That's a concern. I'd like to see more about it. Number two, I appreciate what council has done this evening, opening up to the public, having some difficult discussions. Part of governing is coming to difficult decisions through difficult governance, but I tend to agree with Councilman Abernathy on this as well. I think it is important to at least examine an option which does not take any land away from the property owners on Burbank Road. Having that as an option and as a choice is fundamental to protecting the citizens' property rights in town. And finally, from a safety perspective, I'm not against roundabouts. In fact, I think that there's room for more of them around town. I feel like this is the first step of a growing community, and I have deep concerns about what happens in areas that Councilman Malta talked about, at Friendsville and 83, all along the corridor of Middletown Road. How is that going to affect it? And there are a lot of questions there. So we have a lot of, and somebody brought up the intersection in Milltown and Cleveland. So please keep that in mind. I would encourage you to use the money that's been budgeted to address those concerns. I do think that a moratorium at this time is not necessary because you do control the purse strings. But let's make sure that we get the answers that we need. Thank you very much for your attention this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more person.
My name is Bill Gantz, 1731 Highland Way. I'm here to talk, I think the moratorium is a bad idea for several reasons, but if you work through that, I just don't see where a moratorium helps us at all. I think you asked a number of excellent questions about the engineering, about traffic. I think at some point in time, you have to trust the engineers know what they're doing and did the correct job. And yes, there's going to be some property that's going to have to go along with that. That's part and parcel of how this is done. Mr. Abernathy, you said that you want to advocate for the constituents. I would like to remind all of you, when you were elected to represent the 27,000 people that didn't show up tonight. So there are 27,000 people who are going to use this road. We have a voice also, and you're not going to hear it by complaints. They're going to be silent. You have to decide at some point in time whether the complaints are greater than the good that the peanut or the roundabout will provide. And that's a tough decision, but you're in for public office, and that goes along with it. I agree with everything Roger said. We spent the money, and it would be a waste of money to not do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that being said, I am going to conclude this meeting. Thank you, President, for allowing the public to speak. That was very kind to go into city council time. Thank you.
And related to city council, then we'll go ahead and we'll proceed at 7:30. So we've got about 5 minutes.